In the heart of California, wildfires have become an all-too-familiar threat, but the Hughes fire near Los Angeles was different. It was fast, fierce, and merciless. Within hours, this blaze exploded to over 8,000 acres, destroying homes and displacing thousands. This is the story of John, a resident of Castaic, who lived through this disaster. Through his eyes, we'll explore the terror, resilience, and unity that emerged in the face of such devastation. Let's dive into his journey and discover what truly happened. For John, the day started as any other. The sun rose over the hills, casting a golden glow on his quiet neighborhood in Castaic. The air was calm, and the stillness was a welcomed reprieve from the typical hustle and bustle of the week. Like many mornings, John brewed his coffee and sat on the porch, taking in the serene view. It wasn't long before he noticed something unusual. A faint scent of smoke lingered in the air, but it wasn't strong enough to cause alarm. Reports on the radio mentioned a small brush fire near Lake Hughes Road, which was miles away. Fires like these were common, especially during the dry season, so John shrugged it off as nothing out of the ordinary. But as the day unfolded, the situation escalated. Winds picked up speed, and the once faint smoke began to thicken. By mid-afternoon, the sky was no longer clear but tainted with an eerie orange hue. John felt a growing unease as the wildfire's rapid progression dominated the local news. By evening, the fire was declared an emergency. It had already spread across thousands of acres, fueled by strong Santa Ana winds and bone-dry vegetation. The calm morning was now a distant memory, replaced by a rising sense of dread. John knew this wasn't going to be a typical wildfire, it was something far more dangerous. As the sun set, John stood in his driveway, watching the glow of the fire reflect off the smoky sky. The fire felt closer than ever, and he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. The evacuation order came sooner than John expected. Local authorities, equipped with bullhorns and urgency in their voices, patrolled the streets, urging residents to leave immediately. By now, the fire had grown so large that it threatened multiple neighborhoods, including John's. At first, John hesitated. Like many others, he held on to hope that the fire might be contained before reaching his home. But the relentless updates on his phone painted a grim picture. The Hughes fire had become an uncontrollable inferno, consuming everything in its path. There was no choice but to leave. Packing was chaotic. John grabbed whatever essentials he could fit into a duffel bag, important documents, medications, and a few cherished belongings. The hardest part was deciding what to leave behind. As he rushed to pack, he glanced around his home, wondering if it would still be standing when he returned. Outside, the streets were filled with cars as neighbors loaded up and prepared to flee. John offered to help an elderly couple next door, helping them pack their car with some of their valuables. Together, they joined the gridlocked roads leading out of the neighborhood, their taillights disappearing into the smoky haze. As John drove away, he couldn't shake the heavy feeling of uncertainty. The road ahead was unclear, both literally and figuratively, and all he could do was hope for the best. The wildfire wasn't just a physical threat, it was a test of his resilience and faith. Evacuation centers sprang to life across Los Angeles County, providing refuge to the thousands displaced by the fire. John found himself at a local high school gymnasium, now a temporary shelter. The once familiar environment had been transformed into a sanctuary for those who had nowhere else to go. The gym was filled with rows of cots, families huddled together, and volunteers tirelessly distributing food, water, and blankets. John picked a spot in the corner, placing his bag at his feet. Around him, conversations buzzed with worry and speculation. People shared their stories of escape, their fears, and their hopes. For John, the hardest part of being at the shelter was the waiting. He felt helpless, unable to do anything but follow the updates on his phone. Images and videos of the fire on the news showed the extent of the destruction, homes reduced to ashes, hillsides scorched black, and animals fleeing for their lives. Despite the uncertainty, there was an undeniable sense of society at the shelter. John witnessed strangers offering comfort to one another, children laughing as they played, and volunteers working tirelessly to ensure everyone felt safe. It was a small beacon of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. That night, sleep didn't come easily. The shelter was quiet but heavy with tension. As John lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't help but wonder what tomorrow would bring. Would he still have a home to return to? What would recovery look like for the thousands affected? The Hughes fire's rapid spread caused devastation far beyond homes and human lives. Vast expanses of green landscapes were reduced to barren, blackened ground. The areas around Castaic Lake, once teeming with wildlife and lush vegetation, were now unrecognizable. Animals fled the flames, and many species lost their habitats, with no guarantee of survival in the coming weeks. The thick smoke that engulfed Los Angeles and surrounding counties brought the air quality to hazardous levels. Officials issued alerts, warning residents to stay indoors and limit physical activity outdoors. For vulnerable populations, such as children, the elderly, and those with respiratory conditions, the fire's impact on air quality posed serious health risks. John, like many others, had to rely on masks just to breathe safely. Another looming concern was soil erosion. Without vegetation to anchor it, the exposed soil became highly susceptible to erosion, especially with rain in the forecast. Experts feared that the area might experience dangerous mudslides, further threatening lives and properties already battered by the fire. These environmental aftershocks reminded everyone that the damage wasn't just short-term. The fire also contaminated nearby water sources. Ash, soot, and debris began polluting local rivers, lakes, and reservoirs, threatening aquatic ecosystems and creating challenges for water treatment facilities. For a state already grappling with drought conditions, this additional strain was a major setback. In the days following the fire, environmental organizations and local authorities initiated plans to restore the damaged ecosystems. Reforestation projects, habitat rehabilitation efforts, and erosion control measures were introduced. Still, experts estimated that it would take decades for the area to fully recover. For John, it was heartbreaking to think that the natural beauty he had grown up with might never look the same again. For John and thousands of evacuees like him, the emotional toll of the Hughes fire was profound. The sudden displacement, combined with the fear of losing everything, weighed heavily on everyone. Families huddled together in shelters, trying to console one another while grappling with an uncertain future. At the evacuation centers, mental health professionals were made available to provide emotional support. Counseling sessions were organized to help evacuees process their trauma. For children, who struggled to understand the gravity of the situation, volunteers arranged games and activities to provide a sense of normalcy in an otherwise chaotic time. The fear of the unknown was one of the most difficult aspects for John. Not knowing whether his home was still standing or if his neighbors were safe was an unbearable burden. Many evacuees shared similar stories of sleepless nights and constant worry as they waited for updates about the fire's progression. In these moments, society bonds grew stronger. John found solace in speaking with fellow evacuees, sharing experiences and leaning on each other for emotional support. While the fire had destroyed so much, it had also united the society in ways John hadn't seen before. As days turned into weeks, support groups were formed to help residents cope with the trauma. These groups provided a space for people to share their fears, grief, and, eventually, hope. For John, the camaraderie and collective strength of his society became a beacon of resilience during one of the darkest periods of his life. While evacuees sought refuge, firefighters waged a relentless battle on the front lines. Over 4,000 personnel were deployed to combat the Hughes fire, working tirelessly in extreme conditions. The roaring flames, intense heat, and unpredictable winds made their work dangerous and grueling. Helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft circled the fire, dropping water and fire retardant in an effort to slow the blaze's advance. The aerial footage shown on the news highlighted the sheer scale of the operation. For John, watching these brave men and women risk their lives gave him a deep sense of gratitude and hope. On the ground, crews worked to establish containment lines, clear brush, and prevent the fire from reaching more residential areas. The unpredictability of the fire meant that their work was often undone by sudden wind shifts, but they persevered. Some firefighters worked 24-hour shifts, their determination unwavering despite the odds. Firefighters became the heroes of the society. Their efforts saved countless lives and properties, and their bravery inspired John and others to hold on to hope. John often thought about how much worse things could have been without their intervention. Even as the fire began to subside, many firefighters stayed behind to monitor hotspots and prevent flare-ups. Their dedication extended beyond the immediate danger, ensuring the safety of the society long after the flames were extinguished. After several days, the evacuation orders for certain areas were lifted. Residents like John were allowed to return to their neighborhoods. The drive home was filled with a mix of dread and anticipation. The landscape along the way bore the scars of the wildfire, charred hillsides and burned trees served as haunting reminders of the disaster. As John turned onto his street, his heart pounded. Some homes stood intact, while others were reduced to ashes. Miraculously, his house had survived. The exterior was coated in soot, and the air smelled of smoke, but structurally, it was untouched. Overwhelmed with relief, John thought about how fortunate he was compared to others who had lost everything. Rebuilding the society was an enormous task. Neighbors who had lost their homes received support from volunteers and local organizations. John joined in the recovery efforts, helping distribute supplies and clean up debris. The sense of unity in the neighborhood was stronger than ever. The fire had changed everything. Even for those whose homes were spared, the emotional scars ran deep. For John, his house felt the same, yet different, a reminder of what had been lost and the resilience it took to move forward. While the physical rebuilding was underway, residents also worked to restore their sense of normalcy. The road ahead was long, but John and his neighbors were determined to rebuild not just their homes, but their lives as well. The Hughes fire left behind important lessons for everyone. For John, the experience underscored the importance of preparedness. Creating an emergency plan, assembling a go bag, and staying informed about fire risks became priorities for him moving forward. On a larger scale, the fire reignited discussions about climate change. Experts pointed to rising temperatures and prolonged droughts as key factors contributing to the intensity of wildfires in California. Local and state officials began advocating for more aggressive climate policies to address these challenges. The disaster also highlighted the need for better fire prevention measures. Proposals for controlled burns, improved forest management, and enhanced fire detection systems gained traction. John found himself participating in meetings to advocate for these changes, wanting to be part of the solution. For John, the fire was a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of society. The support and kindness he experienced during the disaster inspired him to give back. He began volunteering with local environmental organizations to help restore the land and prevent future disasters. The Hughes fire was a turning point for many. It was a tragedy, but it also brought about a renewed sense of purpose and determination to build a safer, more resilient future. The Hughes fire was a stark reminder of the destructive power of nature and the strength of the human spirit. For John and his society, it was a time of loss, resilience, and rebuilding. The fire claimed thousands of acres, but it also brought people together in ways they never imagined. As recovery efforts continue, let this story serve as a call to action. We must prepare for the challenges ahead, address the root causes of disasters like this, and support one another in times of need. Together, we can overcome even the greatest of trials. If you found John's story inspiring, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's spread awareness and work towards a safer, more sustainable future. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.